Thank you. What a joy for my wife Tara and I to be here to take part in this wonderful event. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share a few ideas with you. I'm delighted to have the youth here so strongly and contributing, but I'll tell you, I feel humiliated that young people have to show the kind of leadership they are now. Um, that this shouldn't be what they have to do. That's our job to look out for their future. Um, it's it's so great to be here with a group of elders. This is the most important part of our lives. We've lived an entire life. We've learned a lot. Those lessons have been hard won for many of us, but now this is our opportunity to share what we've learned with the coming generations. And we're at this position where we no longer have to worry about being polite and not offending, because we're looking for a job. We're not looking for a raise or a promotion, and we're no longer driven by lust or, a drive for fame or money or power. We can speak the truth now, the way retired admirals and generals against nuclear war did so effectively. So I tell other elders, get off the golf course, get off the couch. Let's get on with the most important part of our lives, to be here at events like this. We all look at the world through the lenses of our area, our professions, the areas that we work in. If you're in business, if you're a politician, if you're a lawyer, you see the world through the lenses of those disciplines. Well, I'm a biologist, and I look at the world through the lens of biology and the driving force of evolution. And today, scientists are able to take DNA, the genetic material, and track the movement, trace the movement of human beings across the planet over time. And if you then follow backwards along those trails, all of the trails of humanity lead back to Africa 150,000 years ago. That was our birthplace. I'm still waiting for the Ku Klux Klan to invite me to talk so I can tell them. We're all Africans, for God's sake. What's your problem? Try to imagine what Africa was like when our species was born. Those grasslands were filled with animals and plants in abundance and diversity beyond anything that you could see in the Serengeti today. And if we were able to take a time machine and go back and look over the great grasslands, we'd have to look really hard to see these little clusters of 3, 4, or 5 of those funny looking furless apes. That was us. And seen in that context, we were not a very impressive animal. I mean, there weren't many of us. We weren't very big, strong, fast. And look at how many of us are wearing glasses. I mean, we wouldn't have lasted there very long, because our secret, the secret of our great success, was hidden. It was a 1.5 kilogram organ buried deep in our skulls. The human brain was our strategy for survival. It endowed us with tremendous curiosity. We were observant. We were inventive, and we had a massive memory. No other animal has a memory of a human being. And we invented a notion of a future. Future doesn't exist. The only thing that exists is now and what we can remember from the past. But because we invented the idea of a future, we are the only animal that realized we can shape the future by what we do in the present. First it's simple. You're walking along a path, it branches, and you go, oh yeah, dad went to the right and he almost got killed by a saber-toothed tiger, but mom went to the left and found something good to eat, so I'm going left. Foresight was absolutely critical in the path to our survival. And that importance of foresight, we tell in stories over and over again. The story of Joseph, the boy with the coat of many colors, he could read dreams, and he forecast a famine and told the Pharaoh, save rain because there's a famine coming. Noah, you know, he's just a carpenter, and a voice says, build an ark. He says, I'm just a carpenter. Build an ark. The flood is coming. And in indigenous people all over the world, the notion of 7 generations, remembering back on 7 generations of our ancestors to guide us into the future of 7 generations of our children. That kind of perspective from foresight. And today we have all of the amplified foresight of scientists with supercomputers. In 1992, over half of all living Nobel Prize winners signed a document called World Scientists' Warning to Humanity. And it began, human beings and the natural world are on a collision course. Human activities inflict harsh and irreversible damage on the environment, on critical resources. If not checked, many of our current practices put at serious risk the future we wish for human society, and may so alter the living world, it will be unable to sustain life in the manner that we know. 1992, that document came out in anticipation of the Earth Summit in Rio, but we didn't pay attention to it. So that in 2017, 25 years later, 16,000 scientists signed World Scientists' Warning to Humanity #2. Warning that all of the signs, the evidence is very, very real, that we are in a very great danger of undermining. Now, people talk about the world, you know, worrying about the world or the planet. The planet is not in trouble. We're not that powerful that we're going to determine the fate of the planet. What has happened is the planet has become less hospitable for animals like us. Last week, I attended the announcement of the latest report by Johann Rockström, a scientist who heads the Potsdam Institute in Berlin, in which he tells us about the state of the 9 planetary boundaries within which any animal must live, within the boundaries prescribed by the biosphere for our that make our survival possible. These 9 boundaries that we must not exceed include the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, the state of fresh water, the pH of the oceans, the phosphorus cycle, the nitrogen cycle. There are 9 of these boundaries that we must not pass if we are to live in a sustainable manner. We have already passed 6 of those 9 boundaries and are about to pass the 7th boundary. So we are in the area around the green, they draw it as a green area of the sustainable 9 areas. And the zone outside that is a red zone called highly dangerous zone. So we're in the danger zone for 6, soon to be 7 of those boundaries. Beyond that boundary is chaos and, without question, probably an unlivable biosphere for an animal like us. So, and as was mentioned earlier at the earlier part of this rally by one of the young people there, we've been given 5 years. I find it hard to believe we have 5 years, but we've been given 5 years to get out of this danger zone back into the safe zone. So, you know, I guess depending on whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, 5 years can be either a lot of time or not a hell of a lot of time. But why is it? Tara and I have been involved in battles now since the 1960s. After Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, we've been swept up in the environmental movement, and we've celebrated many victories. We celebrated the stop of the dam proposed at Site C on the Peace River in British Columbia. We got very involved with the Kaipo people in Brazil, and we stopped a dam at Altamira. And there was a proposal back in the 1970s to drill for oil off Anwar, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and we stopped them. Today, 30 to 40 years after what we celebrated as victories, each of these projects that we thought we stopped is now on the agenda. Last night, Tara and I were horrified to see the national report that the dam at Site C now is ready to be opened. And the dam at Altamira, we stopped the dam in Brazil because the World Bank was offering a $500 million loan to build the dam. But the Brazilian government said in the 2010s, well, our economy is strong enough, we don't need that. And the dam that we stopped is now about to be opened up. What on earth has happened? The problem is the environmental crisis. These battles that we fought were skirmishes. They didn't get at the underlying root cause of our destructiveness. So we get these temporary victories, but we're back fighting them over and over again. And I believe that the problem is that for 99% of human existence, we lived in a world that we understood a web of relationships with all other species of animals and plants, with the air, the water, the soil, and photosynthesis capturing the energy from the sun. Earth, air, fire, water, and the web of living things that are our relatives. That's what we understood. And when you live in a web of relationships, there is a reciprocity of the gift you receive from that web. There is a reciprocity of obligation and responsibility. And this is a frightening thing that's happening now. We saw it in Canada with the truckers thing down in Ottawa. The demand for freedom. And Mr. Poilievre jumped in there. He's right there for freedom. Freedom without responsibility is not freedom, it's anarchy. This is crazy. So it's the lack of reciprocity in everything we do that is the reminder that we get from Indigenous people who continue to see the world through the perspective of the web of relationships. And we have a tremendous responsibility to, as they say, act in a good way to ensure that nature's continued generosity and abundance can continue to support us. But living today, we no longer see ourselves in a web. And I think I put the blame at the Renaissance. The Renaissance began that period when we elevated the mind. I say the mind was a strategy for survival, very successful. But when Rene Descartes said, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, he elevated the mind. The mind was everything about our existence and who we are. And Francis Bacon said, scientia potestas est. Knowledge, science is power. And of course, Isaac Newton discovered laws governing the movement of bodies in our solar system. He said, wow, the world, the universe seems to be a giant clockwork mechanism. And we can begin to focus on the parts of that clock. And we can begin to discover how they all work and eventually put them all back together again and understand the whole. That was the beginning of the reductionist promise of understanding the whole. Now, I won't go into all of the modern work that's going on that showed that reduction simply doesn't work. And but the problem is that the Renaissance, I use that because it gives me a chance. I studied Latin for 4 years. Totally useless, but I do get to cite some Latin phrases and show off with that. But the Renaissance then began to elevate the mind as this instrument that represented power, and power to do things that we saw with the Industrial Revolution a few hundred years later. With machines, we could move weights, we could move the top of mountains, we could dive now to the bottom of the oceans. We can live in outer space. We can travel faster than the speed of sound. It seemed like we have now escaped the boundaries dictated by our animal nature, by our biology. And the key was our intelligence enabled us to escape those constraints. And in that frame, then, we changed from seeing ourselves in a web of relationships to a pyramid where we're at the top and everything down below is for us. We're at the center of the action of everything. And even, all these years of running around as environmentalists, we run around and say, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. But don't worry, we want to stop the tar sands, but there'll be jobs. We'll take care of the workers that are displaced and the economy won't. What the hell? The economy is the driving force of the problem. We had a 10-year period of Mr. Harper saying we can't do anything about climate change. That's crazy economics. So he elevated the economy above the very atmosphere that gives us air to breathe, that gives us weather, climate, and the seasons. And that's what you see now. You're all pissed off at Mr. Ford. Yeah, you should be pissed off. But all the politicians, doesn't matter what party they're in, they have elevated the economy. All they differ in is how we're going to do something to keep that economy growing. We've developed systems to shape, to guide, to constrain human interactions. But guess what? We left nature out. So all of our laws are designed around us. And we think it's a big deal. Quebec recently, a few years ago, gave human rights to a river, the Magpie River. And a number of countries, well, yeah, that's okay. But who the hell do we think we are giving the right to anything in the first place? What about the right of a forest to exist as a community of organisms? What about the right of a mosquito to exist just because it exists? And it's been here a lot longer than we have. What about the right of a river to flow as it has for millennia? And how well do our laws work? Danielle Smith in Alberta is saying what they do with the tar sands, none of our goddamn business. That's an Alberta problem. Wait a minute now. When Chernobyl happened, guess what? It was Swedish scientists that said something's happened over in Ukraine because air doesn't stay within national boundaries. What Alberta does has consequences for everyone on the planet because air is a single entity circulating around the planet and it's in us. We are plugged into that air as well. Whatever we do to the atmosphere is of concern to everyone. But our laws are so human-centric that they don't even recognize that nature is the very foundation of our survival and our well-being. And we've invented this thing called the economy. The economy, or economics, is grounded on the same word as ecology. Ecos is the Greek word for household or domain. Ecology is the study of what keeps the whole domain going. Economics is the management. I would have thought that any economist would say, okay, but before we do that, what are those ecologists saying? Because we don't want anything to do anything that will violate the laws of ecology that let us exist. But we have elevated the economy above those laws. We think we're so smart. We don't need to worry about nature in our economic system. And we've now elevated, the economy then becomes our high priority, and it's built on the creed of cancer. Cancer cells think they can grow forever. Long before they're a huge part of our bodies, they kill us. And yet economists actually think that the economy can and must grow forever. This is absolute madness. Because when we elevate growth as the very measure of progress, nobody asks the important questions. What is an economy? What is the economy based on? What's it for? How much is enough? Are there no limits to economic growth? Does that economy make us happier with all this stuff? We're not asking the really critical questions. It's all about keeping that economy growing. Well, the first thing we got to do with that economy is put the eco back into economics. And the eco is our home, of course. That's what we should be managing everything for. But can you imagine the richest man on the planet? He wants to give up on our home and say, to hell with this, I'm going to Mars. Like, if that isn't an indication that just being rich doesn't make, I mean, if Donald Trump didn't show you that being rich doesn't make you mean you're smart, Elon Musk shows that just being rich doesn't mean you're very intelligent. And our political system that we all look to, we're all yelling to try to influence politicians out there. But, you know, the political system is based on looking ahead to the next election, right? We need action now that is going to take decades, if not centuries. We need to have political decisions made to act in certain ways. They only think from one election to the next. In British Columbia, not long ago, we prided ourselves in having the first carbon tax in North America. And the NDP opposed it and said, axe the tax. And they lost the election. And now a conservative has come out with the same slogan, axe the tax. It's all politics. It's got nothing to do with the important things that have to be done. We have the best environment minister we've ever had in office right now federally. And yet a year ago, I wrote and told Stephen Guilbeault he must resign. Why? He can't tell us the truth, that we are in an emergency. And all this stuff about a tax incentive here, a tax against that, a new law here, a new park here, those are all incremental things that should have been done ages ago, but they're not enough now because it's an emergency. And we have to take action that reflects the degree of urgency that an emergency gives us. I'm happy he's in there, but he's trapped by these systems. And so unless we get out of that anthropocentric way of seeing the world, how do we get out of that? What's the alternative then? And the fortunate thing is that despite everything we've done, there are still people who see the world through the lenses of being in a web, what we call an ecocentric way. And of course, I'm speaking of indigenous people around the world. The land defenders everywhere are fighting for the land. Why? Not only is it the definition of who they are, they're fighting for the land so that they can be responsible for caring for that land the way it must be cared for. So we've got indigenous people, we've got leading scientists, we've got environmentalists. Now what we need to do is transform the systems within which we live. And the Mi'kmaq leader Albert Marshall in the Maritimes says we need two-eyed seeing. We need to see the world through the lens of indigenous values and the indigenous perspective to guide the kinds of insights that we gain from the other eye, which is science and technology and so on. But without the indigenous values and perspective, then we will continue to use the destructive legal, economic, and political systems. And we're here, I believe, as elders to say, yes, we understand that we join with indigenous people. We provide things and power. We must be the most powerful generation ever. We just have to marshal that power. We may not have the same energy, but that's what the young kids are there for. They'll give us some muscle. And thank you.